Well, I mean, it's unconfirmed at this stage, but it looks as though numbers are higher today, and the lockdown could be upwards of 5 to 7 days.
Yeah.
Exposure sites numbering towards 70, even above 70 at the moment. So what's your take on that this morning?
My experience, Pete, is when you've got that many new cases and that many exposure sites, you will continue to see a peak. And the experience, obviously, with the Victorian government is, based on those numbers, they'll probably almost certainly go into lockdown.
So what's the advice for people coming into New South Wales?
Well, obviously we're not going to close the border. We've said, though, to those Victorians who have been at one of those 70 sites that they stay at home. And I think the success of our nation's success when it comes to COVID hasn't just been on the government side, it's been on everybody doing the right thing and looking out for each other and following their health advice. So for those Victorians who have been at one of those sites or are feeling symptoms, they should stay at home. But it was pleasing to see the amount of people in Victoria overnight lining up to get tests, and high testing results in the virus not spreading as fast as it has over the last year.
It has crossed into New South Wales, though, as we just heard, in the Riverina region.
Yep.
So is there a concern at all that the horse may have bolted?
I don't think so. Look, it's an evolving situation. We'll monitor it. I think the main thing is, if you're having symptoms or you've been at one of those sites, you get tested and stay at home, because one person doing the wrong thing can lead to an outbreak. And I think we've got to realise that this is another example that COVID is not going away. We've got to learn to live with the pandemic. There'll be outbreaks from time to time, and the best thing that we can do as a community is make sure that you follow the health advice. It's very clear they're doing that in Victoria, and that's positive.
And we've handled this before.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. We've seen this a number of times in a number of states over the last year. And as I said, the best thing to do, follow the health advice, get tested. And if you've been in one of those exposed sites, do the right thing and stay at home.
Seems to happen in Victoria a whole lot more than anywhere else, though.
Oh, look, whether it's I think this one's coming from South Australia. From my understanding. So look, there may be outbreaks in New South Wales as well over the next 12 months. We've had them in the past, and I think other states throughout the coming year will have them again.
So it's a blanket no that you'll keep the border open?
Well, our advice at this stage is we'll keep the border open, but we are saying to those people in New South Wales, you shouldn't travel to Victoria unless you really need to for family reasons or for professional reasons. And in light of the fact that it's almost certain, based on past performance, that they would go into lockdown, it would probably be not the most advisable thing to do. So I mean, down the track, we might be getting ahead of ourselves here. If numbers do get to a certain level, you would have to shut the border. No, we'll work through that. I mean, it's early days. We'll see what Victoria do. If they're going to go into lockdown themselves and try and get it under control that way, then that obviously eases pressure on New South Wales. So we'll just monitor the situation, and we wish them all the best.
Question marks once again over hotel quarantine and its effectiveness. Do you think it's sustainable economically?
Yeah. I mean, I think hotel quarantine has been one of our great successes here. Now, there will, in circumstances where we're an island continent on the other side of the world, the reality is we are in a better position to keep the virus at bay than other countries. But that success has come off the back of our hotel quarantine program. There will always be occasions over the course of the next 12 months where the situation of the virus coming out of hotel quarantine will occur. But it has been incredibly successful. The vast majority of cases that we've had have come through hotel quarantine, and by the time they come out of quarantine, they're healthy and ready to go. So I think it's been incredibly successful.
So other states should go back to putting more faith in their contact tracers, like you do.
Well, we've invested a lot in the tracing teams and the QR coding, and I've seen firsthand when we have our crisis cabinet meetings that I see the health team having the confidence over the past year to lift restrictions and to have a greater focus on the economy, because they have faith that we have the investment in the tracking and tracing teams, and when there is an outbreak or when there is an exposed site that occurs, they can get to the bottom of it very quickly.
Is it any plan in New South Wales at the moment to establish a quarantine facility away from hotel quarantine?
At the moment, we're focused on the hotel quarantine system. We're also looking at international students, and we're close to finalising our plan there, which will obviously not come at the expense of returning Australians. It would be in addition to, but it would be replicated on that current system. But to your question, the virus is not going away, And as leaders, we need to always adjust our policy settings as this goes on. Simply doing the same thing we were doing 12 months ago is not necessarily going to be the best situation or best system in place over the next 12 months. So we're always looking at those things, but at the moment we're very happy with the hotel quarantine system. We just want the other states like Queensland to pay their bill.
Well, they say they're not going to.
Yeah, well,
you're not holding your breath for that?
No.
So you just mentioned there you're very close to finalising quarantine for students. How close?
Yeah, well, we've gone out to tender for that accommodation, and I think it's been signed off by Health and Police, and we'll be announcing something shortly once we've got the final tick off.
You think Jodi McKay's on borrowed time?
I think. Look, obviously we're focused on the situation. Well, the reality is, Pete, the Labor Party is a shambles in New South Wales, and you've got a situation now where your better talent is on their backbench. Their idea of generational change is going back to bringing forward a Shadow Treasurer who was their
Michael Daley. So he's coming back to be your opponent. What do you make of that?
Well, he's been on the bench for the last couple of years, so he'll probably pull a hammy when he gets up to the chamber. But look, they are a mess, and I think what they've been exposed for over the last 3 days is at the heart, when we're meant to be looking after the people of New South Wales, they're in there infighting and at war, and they've got to stop focusing on themselves, because good governments have good oppositions, and the state of New South Wales and our people need them to get their house into order as quickly as possible.
Okay, a couple of quick tax questions.
Yeah.
You've got a consultation process in at the moment. As an option to replace stamp duty with land tax, the VICs are increasing stamp duty. So where's your reform up to?
We just finished consultation. We've received thousands of submissions, which is positive, and we're just going through that now and trying to iron out. We had a model that we were consulting on, so we'll look at where that lands, but we're continuing to do that work.
You're still committed to it in your budget?
Yeah, still working through it, and committed, because we need a system that lowers the tax burden and drives home ownership. And it's one of the biggest challenges, particularly in Sydney, are young families getting into the housing market. But look, from our budgets on June 22. But from my perspective, we are not in favour of increasing taxes. We are in favour of reducing taxes to help drive economic growth. So we want to put downward pressure, particularly on a regulation and tax basis, on businesses and families across our state.
Are you surprised that Jim Chalmers seemed to support your model recently?
Well, it's a good model, so I'm not surprised, and there are smart people in the Labor Party.
Okay, no doubt you have studied the federal budget papers and seen the decade of deficits that are ahead. Is it time for the feds to convene a summit, or at least lead on tax reform to repair that budget?
Well, I think we talk about economic recovery, but we should be looking at this as an opportunity to transform the country and drive out of this pandemic. And we don't want to go in a structural deficit. We can't just focus on today. We've got to make sure that the decisions that help drive immediate economic growth don't have adverse impacts on generations to come, because it's our kids who are going to be paying back this debt.
So would you be open to a summit?
Very much so. We should be looking at ideas. I mean, there's got to be the right time for it. They've got a big job in front of them right now dealing with the pandemic, but we'll get.
What about broadening the base of GST?
Look, I think we should always be open to having the best tax structure possible, and taxes that aren't an impediment to economic growth. I think GST is one of the better taxes, but I would only be in favour of increasing or broadening the GST in circumstances where we removed and abolished other taxes that were not as efficient.
Like
stamp duty.
Okay.